Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show for Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. GMT, every day of the week, where we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make money on the internet. And that would include today the Bitcoin market. We're just running back the exact same show we did yesterday. Same headline, different price, same direction. We are moving upwards. Cannot wait to get into all of the discussion from the snapshot and more in just a moment. But just to introduce ourselves, my name is Bchek. I'm your host. I'm joined by my legendary co-hosts, Legendary and Sammy, and we're going to get into all the news in just a moment, as well as some bigger discussion on where our attention is going in the short to medium term. But before we do that, just a reminder, friends, nothing that we say here is financial advice. This modern market is exceptionally risky. We do not know anything for sure. So please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Legendary, it is Wednesday, the 28th of February. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
GM, it is a weird day. Like, obviously, I love the market movement. I'm not going to repeat the same thing I said yesterday. I'm not going to be like, oh, everything's great because the market goes up. That is great. But I just want today to be over. I just want it to be over. I want to get my portal coin. I want to be able to degen into Blast and have fun exploring that L2, reallocate my capital into that. So yeah, great. And I know that if BTC does the same thing it did yesterday, for 2 more days, we are back at all-time high. This is obviously insane, but again, I want today to be over. I want to focus on Blast and want to count my portal coins.
Today doesn't really exist, does it?
Not really.
We're just waiting for it to be tomorrow where the real action happens. Sammy, how are you feeling about tomorrow? Is there any chance it could be like a nothing burger? Like, is there any chance we're just overexcited for the launch of Blast and the launch of Portal Coin? How are you seeing it at the moment?
No, I think you're going to see a lot of capital flow straight from Portal Coin probably into Blast. It just makes sense in terms of the direction of the attention. I mean, I personally had no exposure to Portal Coin, so none of my capital is going to be going that way, but I will be putting capital through into Blast. And I think Zai, that staking went live as well yesterday or today. So I've got involved with that, and that's kind of like an infrastructure play for Web3 gaming. There's just a lot going on. So there will be capital flowing in various directions. But to me, Blast seems like the logical direction where the bulk of that capital is going to flow.
Very, very interesting. We're going to talk a little bit about where we think things are going. In fact, why don't we just do it a little bit now? Legendary, what do you think about what Sammy just said? Like, do we think rich Portal Coin holders will be going in the direction of Blast? Do you think they will be potentially staking Portal Coin, which is one of the headlines? Maybe we'll speak to that in a bit more detail in a little bit. But do you see there being significant Portal buyers? Like, what's your sense at the moment?
I think staking could be very attractive. Just following up on the discussion that we had yesterday with Tia and all the other things that are to be staked to receive other airdrops. I reread the announcement by Portal Coin partnering up with Imaginary Ones and to share the world of the bubble token, bubble powered world of Imaginary Ones. So it is like a very slight hint that there could be something more to it. So I think staking could be attractive, could be interesting. Portal Coin to Blast, yeah, why not? I mean, I think there is gonna be loads of opportunities. There's still protocols obviously raising on Blast, so not everyone has completed their fundraising rounds yet. There will be incentives for early depositing. On the other hand, there's also a lot of capital unlocking. So probably there is maybe an overlap between people who deposit in Blast and unlock Portal Coin tomorrow at the same time. But definitely agree with Sam that if anything at all, I rather think it's Portal Coin in to Blast than necessarily the other way around.
Okay, I agree with that statement for sure. I think Blast will see a lot of activity in that way. One of the reflections I was just having as you were talking about Portal Coin was on how you personally allocate to these things. You mentioned, I think you got in at the pre-sale round. I angeled in. But I think one of the things as a personal reflection, one of the things I'm doing at the moment, and because you mentioned imaginary ones as well, and I've also actually angeled into that one, which is good for me if they're connected and it works out well. But one of the things I'd kind of decided is like, oh, if you're an angel into something early, and then 1 month passes or 2 months passes, and then the community sale takes place, it doesn't mean just because you've angeled in that you shouldn't go in again. Because it could still potentially be a fantastic deal. And I think that's one of those things, you know how, Sammy, I think we were talking yesterday about the trade where we were talking about WASIs at 2.2 or something. And it's like, oh, but they were 0.8 yesterday. So you can't buy it now because they've already gone up so much. But it's like, it could still be a great price right now. And I think one of the things when I'm reflecting personally on the Portal Coin round, and maybe potentially even the imaginary ones now, maybe I'll learn from that and assess that differently moving forward. If there are further kind of pre-sale opportunities, if you do believe in something and you think it's really good and you've assessed them both, just because you've in before, if you do have some additional capital lying around, why not go in again? Why not go in again if the deal is good on the table? Like Legendary, maybe do you want to speak to that a little bit? I know you've got some exposure to Pixelmon, for example. Like, how are you thinking about that? That was just one of my personal reflections from this process.
You are reading my mind. First of all, I wanted to say that I like how you use angel as a verb, to angel into something. It
It is a
just
verb.
sounds a bit more sophisticated than aping into something. I like that. Second of all, exactly, Pixelmon is the point I wanted to make with, I think it was Grail.eth, who obviously has very, very heavy Pixelmon bags and did max out his Pixelmon pre-sale allocation. I think there was like almost another 500K or whatever that he put into that. So it depends on the conviction, right? If something is a smaller gamble, like I'm gambling on a couple of protocols on Blast, I'm like, okay, I'm very happy with that gamble if it goes to zero, if it pumps. But if something is more of a conviction play, why not go in multiple rounds? Although with that being said, if you look at because I had a look actually at that data point, at Web3 VCs in general, that is typically rather rare. Like the majority, you don't see the same VC coming in multiple subsequent rounds. They typically don't do that in Web3.
Interesting. Do you have
Maybe
any
like 20-ish%, but don't quote me on that.
Do you have any feeling why that is? Do you think ultimately it is a risk management play? It's like, look, I've got my exposure to this. Maybe this is the more responsible thing to be fair. And maybe 9 times out of 10, what I've done is actually the wise thing to do. It's just in this particular case, it would have been fantastic to go in again. Do you have any sense of that? Do you think it's a risk management thing or anything else?
I think it's a risk management thing on the one hand. On the other hand, I think there's like so many opportunities coming up, so that the question often is opportunity cost. Do I want to go with a more expensive round where I already have exposure, or do I want to be 1 to 2 rounds earlier in another project that could also like run up and do a 30-40x or whatever that might be?
This is interesting. It's interesting how you size these things. And one of the things I was thinking recently, and would be interested to hear your thoughts on this, just thinking out loud on the topic, is there was a particular protocol that was raising at like 20 mil a while ago, and it's still kind of ongoing. And I thought, okay, I think it's a good deal. Maybe some of the terms weren't ideal about it. And so I was kind of waiting on it. And you can just feel the market in general getting hotter, and like other valuations from other projects coming in higher and higher and higher, and them getting sold out. And like they're still being demanded at higher valuations. And so one of the things I was wondering is, on some level, you want to kind of wait to, for a better project down the road, or for a better, a different high quality project that's launching a little bit later. But at the same time, I do think there's something happening at the moment where the valuations are rising. And so relative to the almost irrespective of the quality of the project, the valuations are rising, if you see what I mean. And so there could be a play to go in sooner rather than later in order to lock in a better valuation, because even the better stuff is going to go at higher valuations. Or do you think it doesn't matter, Sammy, and you think you should just go with quality if possible, even if that's a higher valuation?
I think what you're touching on is the market conditions. If the market's just full sending, I think a lot of this stuff's gonna be raised at high valuations or come out the gate listed on after TG at various centralized exchanges at ridiculous valuations. I think buying in at a later round, sometimes it's like it can be a bit of a kick in the teeth. It's like, I got in at this round, so why should I buy in at that round? It's almost like an ego thing. But sometimes it shouldn't really matter, because like that valuation could still do like a 10x from the round that you got in at a later stage, in which case that's a pretty good ROI. Well, it's an incredible ROI. And I think like, sometimes it does come down to diversification and risk management. Like, do you want to put all your eggs in one basket? And Legendary touched on that high conviction play. Sometimes that might be the right option. But for me personally, I'm more risk averse. So I would probably, if I was in on an early round, I would then probably diversify and try other opportunities, particularly in the current market.
Interesting. Interesting stuff. I think it's completely fair. As you say, it probably depends on people's particular circumstances. I have two more reflections on this, then we're going to get into all of the headlines from the snapshot, which is pinned up top to get you up to speed with what's going on. Two more reflections for me. The first one is a personal strategy. We were talking about this in private, Legendary. I'm kind of leaning towards high bets, high conviction, like bigger size and like particular bets rather than spraying and praying at the moment. How are you thinking about sizing at the moment, and just, the volume of deals that you want to do, as opposed to, and sizing things appropriately? What's your thought process at the moment? How are you evaluating this deal flow?
I'm trying to diversify it by terms, in the sense of that there's a couple of plays that I see as super short term. They have quick unlocks, very quick vesting. I'm more on the degenerate side of things and don't lock up liquidity for too long, because I think liquidity is king in the market like that. You will see it in many various ways. You have rounds that are closing very quickly. You have people who are dumping NFTs because they want out and want to ride ETH or BTC on the way up. You have people dumping their Pixelmon because they thought they are fine to do so after the pre-sale and are getting burned for that, and someone is there to buy that dip. So I think liquidity is king. For that reason, I do want to have a good allocation of my own investments to not be locked up for too long. On the other hand, I also think that there are long conviction plays that are, for me, maybe more on the infrastructure side, which I do find to be quite interesting. And there I'm fine to have a longer vesting schedule, have longer cliffs with that. And I think, to me, it's more, I'm more in Sammy's camp than in yours. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but it's just my risk preference.
Sure.
I don't want to have 2-3 single big bets, and I'd rather be spraying and painting, but also diversify by term sets, in a sense.
I think that's a really, really good point. Like, I think even amongst the bigger bets that I have, I couldn't do 1 year cliffs, for example, for all of them. Like, there is actually something I did 1 month cliff and 36 months vesting. That's right. One year cliff, 36 months vesting. It's like, okay, I think this is a really awesome thing. I'm happy to do that on this occasion, but there's no way I'm signing up to that across the variety of my portfolio. Final reflection on this, which I think is really interesting, is that the conversation that we're having, kind of, if you step back for a second, it's pretty crazy. This is an NFT market show, and we're so much talking about this deal flow investing side of stuff, partly because we're investing in the crypto stuff a little bit as well. However, a lot of these things that we're talking about are NFT projects. We mentioned Imaginary Ones, we mentioned Pixelmon, mentioned Pixel, also so far today. And so it's just a reflection on where the NFT market is and what the real nature of the NFT market is. And we've spoken about this before, about how in essence, it's like a different round of a raise. Like it just fits into the journey of raising capital in order for you to get this liquid return at the end in the form of a bunch of tokens. Legendary, any reflections on that kind of meta point on the whole discussion?
Yeah, I think that fundraising structure, how you described it, makes a lot of sense, but I think it also adds complexity because in a similar vein, how you said, if you did something in an earlier round, you might want to do it in a later round in certain circumstances. And if you have access to certain deal flows, then the question also becomes, do you want to invest in the token round, or do you want to buy the quote unquote underlying NFT that might also give you access to tokens, especially if liquidity is a constraint, and especially that maybe with a token round, you can be more flexible. You can do 1K, 1.5K, but say you buy something like Pixelmon at a 1.5 ETH floor, you basically have to buy that in increments of almost 5K. So it's not as easy to manage your liquidity.
Interesting point. I just want to throw it out to the audience for a second, whether you're watching on YouTube or whether you're listening in the audience. Like, is this an interesting conversation to you? Are you here for the NFT market purely? Like, do you just want to know about how NFTs are trading on Blur or Mintify or OpenSea? Or is it interesting to hear about the kind of deal flow that's happening behind the scenes at the same time? I think it's kind of interesting. I'd love to see some comments to hear what you guys are thinking about it. Is it partly annoying because if you're not able to access it? Like, I think that's one of the feelings that I know some people have felt when they're not able to access this type of thing, although it is one of the realities of the space, I think, at the moment. We'll be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please do reply, and we'll see where we get to there. And I'll try to shout some people out and reflect on that for a moment. Let's get to a couple of hands before we get to all of the headlines and more. Oxy, your hand is raised. Welcome, my friend, to the stage. What are your thoughts on this topic of deal flow when it comes to raising for NFTs?
Yeah, thank you. I thought it was interesting you were talking about getting in on multiple rounds of financing, and I guess leveraging kind of my experience with the traditional markets. A lot of VCs or private equity funds will get in at multiple equity rounds in order to not get diluted out of their share. So from Series A through Series F, they'll just continue reinvesting and contributing capital to these companies to not get diluted. Whereas in Web3, you kind of already know that allocation and how it's going to be broken out. So these VCs get in at Series A, if you will, with the first round of funding. And then they're like, okay, I know that to a certain extent, we're not going to get diluted out because we know how many tokens are going to be allocated to the remaining fundraising round. So we don't feel like we have to continually keep getting in because this is what our exposure needs to be. So I just thought that was interesting that it's just a similar but different dynamic.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Similar but different, as you say. Thanks for that, Oxy. We want to get into the headlines now. So we're going to get over to the snapshot, which has all of the headlines from today's show. And we're going to get into the price action. We're going to get into all of the headlines, as always, from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. If you do find it brings you some value today, please do give it a like. So we have crypto up 4%, Bitcoin kicking through 59K. I think it's just dipped beneath that just for the moment. ETH is up above 3.3K. Solana is steady at 111, trailing the other two majors. Ape was almost at $2 when I checked last. The headlines today, Bitcoin hits 59K, ETH is at 3.3. Interestingly, Matt Hoogan shared that BTC purchased by ETFs yesterday was 9,163. New Bitcoin produced by miners, 900. This is the maths we were talking about yesterday. We've got some more data on that in just a little bit. Number two, institutional investment advisors Fidelity recommend 1 to 3% Bitcoin allocation. W. Clementel says Fidelity now recommending a 1 to 3% crypto allocation in your portfolio. It's a gateway drug. What happens when that 1 to 3% becomes 3 to 6%? We think we know what he's alluding to there. Portalcoin, the final headline, announces staking. We touched on that yesterday. I mentioned that I thought that that was definitely one of the elements that was included. Stakers will gain VIP access to the most hyped token pre-sales, NFT mints, and drops from your favorite brands. Though we don't know the details there, they said Portal is your all-access pass to the Web3 gaming universe, spanning every chain. Stake more, score more, get more access. Higher scores catapult you to elite reward tiers. Interesting to see how they build that out. And we'll speculate on some of the price action a little bit later in the show. In terms of some notable sales, we had an ordinal inscription number 2 selling for 24.48 Bitcoin. That's $1.4 million. That's pretty outrageous. And if you actually look at it in the snapshot, it's pretty hilarious looking as well. You will enjoy. Number 2, CryptoPunk 3D glasses, 89 ETH. That's $299,000. And the CryptoPunk bandana nerd selling for 70 ETH. That's $235,000. The CryptoPunk floor has very sneakily, rapidly gone up with the fact that ETH is ripping so fast at the moment. I think it's approaching 200K now, after being at 150K for a long time, after being in the bear market closer to 50, 75K. So real movement on the CryptoPunk side of things because of the increase in value in ETH. In terms of some floor prices, we've got CryptoPunks at 58.9 ETH, Bored Apes at 22.8, Mutants at 4.1, DeGods at 2.9, Captains up 9% at 5.6, Azuki's at 6, Penguins at 19.4, Mad Lads at 188 Sol, and Noun's winning bid was at 6 ETH. Legendary, that is the price action. Those are the headlines. Any points to note before we get into some of the Bitcoin data and discussion?
Obviously, the number 2 inscription is sick. Like, it's insane to see that kind of price action. Maybe another collection that I was looking at, because I do have exposure to it and I saw it move quite a lot, is Yoga Pets in the Well ecosystem, now up 24% on the day, 60% on the last 7 days. That is on Token Rumors coming closer. That is on Newman Capital getting involved, which is the VC who basically invested into everything that launched on Binance over the last over the last cycle. So that's interesting to see that heat up as well. But definitely the bigger news to me is inscription number 2 selling for that insane amount.
Interesting. Yeah, completely fair enough. Sammy, another project that I saw move very aggressively in the last 24 hours. It is featured a little bit later in the snapshot. Rec Guy is up 30 something percent. I know you're a holder there. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts behind that move?
Well, I mean, so I think it's tied to the juice allocation. So there was that.
Interesting.
And we know that OV and Mando are deep into the Blast ecosystem. So I think there's probably something that's gone on there that's given Rec Guy an allocation, and I think there's probably going to be a good opportunity for other allocations going forward. I think we spoke about Wozzies yesterday, and I think we touched on, well, why would we invest in this now? And there's probably other NFT projects that are going to get those allocations. And I think Rec Guy was announced after that. And I suspect, given that you mentioned about the Yoga Pets, that it wouldn't surprise me if they get allocations through the VC connections. So there's probably going to be a few more projects that are going to be selected for this kind of stuff. And I think that's probably going to become a bit of a meta going forward.
Yeah, interesting stuff. We've spoken about this before. Do you think, I think it was in the comments to something yesterday, I replied, might have been to one of Thread Guy's tweets, where he was basically going hard on the idea that the most successful projects right now will have like very vocal founders, and projects will, or maybe this was my comment on it, projects will essentially sell some of their allocation in exchange for a quote tweet from a founder. Like, if you can get Ovi to quote tweet your stuff, give Rec Guys a bit of an allocation, right? He's probably going to quote tweet it. If you can get Ice Bags to quote tweet your stuff by giving a bit of an allocation, like, you're going to do that, right? I don't know if anyone's actually reading the terms of these things to figure out whether you're getting a meaningful amount, but just by being on a list with your collection, and it allows the founders to flex that they've secured an allocation in some way, like, you're going to get quote tweeted. So what do you think about that as a almost thesis for for these kind of moves that are happening, Legendary? Like, is that possible?
I mean, Beanie put it perfectly. He said in a tweet or in a post, if your founder isn't out there making airdrop deals for you, best to find a new founder or just rate it to 0. Obviously a bit sensationalized, a bit exaggerated, but generally agree with that this is the meta. Again, it introduces a lot of extra volatility, just like every meta, because once that fades, then there's no more airdrop exposure to collections who didn't have.
Sure.
I'm not saying they didn't have great communities, but there's a lot of great communities in Web3. Once that fades, prices will tank. Just from the Rekt guy's perspective, I think the timing for that is pretty cool. I'm thinking about NFT Paris, where like I know multiple people are like, oh, I'm gonna buy a Rekt guy just to have access to that event because I think it's cool. And then you're like a couple days in that community, and you get an airdrop announced on Blast. You get to see a nice pump in price. That's just beautiful, beautiful timing on that.
I agree. I think they really, really do a fantastic job on the event side, and people are quite happy to buy the NFTs just to be able to enjoy and go to those things. So shout out to the Rekt Guy team, Ovi, Mando, and Kals. Jack, your hand is raised. I want you to come in quickly here before we hit the Bitcoin news. How are you doing, my friend? What are your thoughts? Welcome to the stage.
Yeah, just from personal experience, I am seeing this across the board in some of the projects that I'm in, like token announcements. I think we've seen what Budgies have done the other day. Luca put up a post to say, if you do like a little exclamation mark and a fish in the Discord, it'll show you all the project token launches that are currently out, and basically pushing the community to go and really promote those. And I've seen it with Frank as well, like a lot of the tokens coming in, a lot of the NFT allegations, and they are really substantial to like some of the biggest drops across ordinals, across ETH. Like there's some real big allocations for some smaller collection sizes go into these communities and projects with founders, and with also like Twitter Spaces and other like platforms that they can really sort of push the project on.
Yeah, I think that's very, very fair enough. It's definitely something that's been on our mind at the moment, and I think it's on a lot of people's mind too. One nice point I saw from Jalil, who is associated with Visualize Value, and Jack Butcher, friend and great thinker, really. He kind of pushed back on the idea that that's where value comes from, and I knew that he would do that because he's a smart guy, and obviously when you're building out something like Opepen and the Jack Butcher ecosystem and an artist in your own right, like you definitely want to think that people derive value from other aspects rather than just thinking there's going to be some gold rush around the corner. And I definitely do think that value can accrue in that way too. It's just that at the moment, this is what people are running around for. So I think these two things can happen at the same time. You can have people running around for airdrops and trying to jump to the collection which has the most prominent founder who's going to be able to pull in the most deal flow, but also you can have that universe that are less concerned about that and just are creating like high quality collectible digital objects, and value will continue to accrue on that way too. Let's draw the line on that there. Shout out to El Hombre in the YouTube comment saying it is very interesting to hear your personal journeys and perspectives on this and how you navigate through it as it becomes a part of investing when you make some profits in Web3 and have been around. Well, that's good to hear. I'm glad it is interesting. We will keep trying to provide some of that context and information from kind of behind the scenes as we navigate the space and as we kind of move forward. Let's hit the headlines right away, though. We obviously said Bitcoin hit 59K. I'm going to share on the screen some interesting data points for discussion, maybe some of which we have already considered yesterday because we basically ran a show about Bitcoin yesterday too. But here we have some extra data which we didn't have yesterday. So we said Matt Hoogan shared that the Bitcoin purchased by ETFs yesterday was 9,163. I'm showing this on live on X and live on YouTube for the people who would like to see at the same time. But for the people listening, there were only approximately 900 Bitcoin produced by miners yesterday. And this is the thing that we've been talking about for a while. It's just like the maths is in Bitcoin's favor in that respect, where as so long as this demand is as ferocious as it is for the moment. It's just completely outpacing the amount of Bitcoin being produced. A couple of other touch points on Bitcoin, reflections from other people. Beanie tweeted, another record trading day for Bitcoin ETF stack. These funds are acquiring, again, mentioning this data because this is the data point they consider important. These funds are acquiring 5 times the amount of Bitcoin being mined each and every day. And in less than 2 months with the halving, that will be 10x. By the end of the year, the funds will have 5% of the total max supply of Bitcoin. That's pretty significant. I'm just going to give us one more to consider. This is from Path, who has gone a little bit quieter in the last year or two, but I think he was one of the big traders, a few years ago. He said, patience is rewarded. After almost a decade of trying for a Bitcoin ETF, we see just how much FOMO the institutional inflows cause themselves. The fact that ETH can keep pace in this environment should terrify anyone without exposure. A series of bullish tweets here, Legendary, both on Bitcoin and ETH. I'm going to let you take it in the direction you want for some of your reflections. Sammy, definitely want to hear from you on this too.
Yeah, a couple of comments on that. Judging by the very recent volume, that ratio is not a 5x, it's rather a 10x. 10x the amount gets bought and compared to the amount of BTC that gets mined. Also wanted to add another post to that series of posts, and shout out to John in the comments. John is an absolute legend for providing us during almost every show with insightful comments. And this one is 20 minutes old and by our favorite analyst, Eric Balkunas, saying that IBIT took in 520 mil all by itself yesterday. That's the biggest haul for Bitcoin ETF ever, and the second most of any ETF yesterday. Total of $8 billion in assets under management, top 5% among all ETFs. And this means that a good portion of that massive volume, and that very much adds to that institutional FOMO that you just mentioned, was new buying versus arbitrage.
Interesting stuff. As you say, like completely crazy numbers. Shout out to John. Cannot agree more. Always providing like real-time quality information. We don't always bring it up because we're moving around a lot on the show. Sometimes we have to stick to particular topics, but we appreciate John a hell of a lot for providing that information. Quick question, Legendary, on this. Have you got, I'm coming to you in a moment, Sammy, have you got any of those texts yet from people? Because yesterday I received the first one. I received, let me try and see if I can see what one of my really good friends said. I don't want to mess up the Twitter space at the same time, so I'm just going to leave the phone like as it is. But the first text in a while, I think it was something just like bull ? Or something like that. Where, and I've kind of got to the point where I'm not going to be telling people what to do anymore. I've kind of spoken to people about crypto and they know what my position is on it. But I'm just saying that was the first text in a while. Have you received anything? How are you responding to people who have maybe not participated in a long time or not responded very well when you've told them about it before? What's your stance on that?
I haven't received any text by Web2 friends. However, I had an interesting ride with my Uber driver who started to shilling his crypto bags to me and shared a secret with me. I mean, I probably shouldn't share it now because there's 160 people listening in right now, but he found a coin that has a T as a logo, and that T looks very, very similar to Elon Musk's Tesla, and he's convinced that Elon Musk is behind that coin, and once the world will know that, in his opinion, it will straight flip ETH. So that's definitely one to have a look for on CoinMarketCap. Obviously, I'm joking here, right? So I skipped the friends are reaching out to ask me if it's a bull market or if the JPEGs are finally worth something again. I completely skipped that part, and I'm now basically listening to bull conversations by Uber drivers.
I like it. I mean, that's a good indicator, right? I think that is one of the indicators that finally, like, other people are catching on a little bit. But the interesting part of my conversation, it was part of a group chat. One person sent the message that was like, okay, it's got through to you at this point. But the other friend, there's only 3 of us in there, clearly like just went to check at that point in time, and he was just like, oh my God, like what's happened? And so it's just like these people are like kind of invested, but really have missed this whole move. So obviously one person just picked it up, but the other person only checked because of the message from a friend. So it's like they've been checked out. Like they didn't know that Bitcoin is knocking on the door of 60K at the moment. And these are like smart, intelligent people who are invested a little bit, but not too much, and just, you know, part of the normie crowd, you would say. It's like just completely not on their radar. Sammy, quick reflection from you. Is that kind of how you've felt it at the moment in terms of feeling about other people's perceptions of where we are?
Yes, I've had traditional finance friends reach out to me. I think most of them are in banking, so they have clients that are asking them, how do I get exposure to Bitcoin through these ETFs that have arose? So then they've come to me and said, okay, well, which ETFs should we be suggesting to our clients? I'm just like, well, I'm not the financial advisor, you're the financial advisor. So it's like, I think for me, it's probably that more sophisticated professional that's probing now. I don't think it's the general public. I haven't had too many friends that aren't in traditional finance talk to me about Bitcoin and stuff yet, but the traditional finance friends, they are probing. And I think just the point around like the projections of what the point that Fidelity made around what 3% allocation. I mean, that's got 10 trillion of assets under management. If they're proposing that, I'm assuming that's what their internal targets are going to be. So that's like a 300 billion just from Fidelity alone. If you've got a $1 trillion market cap for Bitcoin, they're proposing something that is effectively a third of what the current market cap is, and that's one financial institution. So if you think about BlackRock and all these other firms, and then eventually when the pension funds get in, like it could explode.
Inspires some aggressively heavy breathing there when you really when you start to think of some of those numbers. Let's go there to it then. In fact, we're going to go into that Fidelity point in just a moment and the kind of allocations, discuss that in a moment. But Matthew, you have your hand raised. I know Legendary has another point on the media coverage too. Matthew, first, welcome to the stage, my friend. What are your thoughts on the kind of, you know, the lack of coverage or lack of appreciation of the pump from the average participant at the moment?
Good morning, everybody. So good to be here. B-Check, our phones are on the same sync because I had a college student reach out to me. I went and spoke at Skidmore College last year, and he reached out and said, hey, I've got this Bitcoin. Do you think I should keep it? What should I do? Should I get more? And like all of a sudden, being an investment advisor is kind of like not coming back to bite me, but like people are realizing that and they're trying to figure out like, oh, you're the person to ask. I guess I should ask this. And the other quick note is that my mom and I had a conversation, and she's in the middle of writing a book. She's a famous television writer, author. Cool. And she's writing a book, and she's like, I'm putting Bitcoin in my book. I need you to help tell me about how this person can get Bitcoin out of a Bitcoin ATM. And I'm like, yes, this is amazing. Because in 2017, she's like, this is a Ponzi scheme, and you're not getting anything for Christmas. So
that's so funny. That's amazing. This is how we bring retail in, include it in traditional literature. Absolutely love it, Matt. Thanks so much for sharing that. It is really interesting to feel the demand on like a human level when you have conversations with normal people. And I think we're probably at the same point where it's like maybe 1 or 2 people have mentioned it, but the majority have definitely missed everything. Legendary, you wanted to make a point on the media coverage to date. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, on a more serious note, because I stopped reading newspapers a good while ago. But every time I see BTC or our market moving, I want to check in to see if they cover it. And basically, if you look at all of the Austrian or also like British newspapers that I've been checking, it is mostly coverage of Israel-Palestine and the war in Ukraine. And I think we just didn't have those 2 wars in the last cycle, and they're for very, very apparent reasons still taking up a massive amount of the media coverage. So this is, to me, one of the reasons why I think that a lot of the normies are not, hey, is BTC back to almost all-time high and jumping in, because like we have other political issues that are being covered more than the price action in crypto.
Interesting. It's a very, very interesting point. I hadn't thought about that at all. Although, just reacting to that live, I guess we had all kinds of COVID stuff the first cycle, and yet everything ripped still. And that was definitely took over the mainstream news channels. So I wonder how that relates to, whether that equals a similar type of distraction, whether this is a bigger distraction and therefore people can't deal with the two things at the same time. Very interesting to think about. Anything else on that, Legendary? I'd probably want to think about that more.
Yeah, I think interesting that you bring up COVID. I think that kind of was more connected in the sense, people are staying at home, food delivery stocks are pumping, people are, more interested in digital collectibles because they can't do real things.
Yeah.
And it's harder to connect more.
Sure.
I mean, you could make that connection, but people are, afraid of hyperinflation, etc., and fleeing into cryptocurrencies. But it's an easier connection to make with COVID on the media coverage than with a war.
Interesting. Very interesting. I think there's something to that. Want to definitely think about that a little bit more. Although I agree with you on the news front, I've kind of checked out as well. And the only reason I would go to check it out is to see what the normal people are digesting, like to see what they are up to and what they're being told to think or fed in terms of their media diet. Interesting stuff. Final point on the Bitcoin stuff, I think, is to touch on what Sammy started to allude to, which is this Fidelity now recommending a 1 to 3% crypto allocation. I'm just going to share this on screen at the same time for the people watching in on X and YouTube. We've got Fidelity now recommending a 1 to 3% crypto allocation in your portfolio. Will saying that this is a gateway drug. What happens when that 1 to 3% becomes 3 to 6%? Slowly, then suddenly. And Santiago Santos, who I believe is like a fairly prominent ETH CryptoPunk, but also I think he's been a prominent investor in the space for some time, had this to say. He said, "I once heard an early pioneer in private equity say that he didn't understand the tech, but he did understand the formation of a new asset class. And that was his thesis for crypto, that it would grow in the same way private equity did from once a non-existent asset class to what it is today. Surreal that all of this has happened in the better part of the last decade." Sammy, what are your thoughts on that? Like, it's kind of taking a few steps back and saying, it doesn't matter about the tech, doesn't matter about the underlying technicalities. This is just like a new space, an investable asset class. And for that reason alone, its market cap is going to go up over time because it seems to be future facing and the world seems to be moving in that direction. What do you think about that take?
I think people are naturally curious. They're going to look for new things to invest in, but for it to not just be a fad, it has to have some sort of fundamentals. And I think not understanding the tech, it will probably end up being here for a short period of time if that tech fails. But given if you properly dig into it and understand that tech and it's going to be around for a long time, it'll probably be an asset class that will be here for a long time. So I think you kind of have to understand both for a new asset class that will be around for a long time. But I suspect there's fads that people invest in specifically around collectibles. Like you might buy certain things that hold value for a medium or short period of time. But then I think I was speaking to someone at NFT Paris that mentioned about investing in terms of generations. So someone who is growing up buying a specific item, then hits their max wealth later on in life, all of a sudden those items gain a lot of value because of that nostalgia.
Sure.
So I think from a collector's standpoint, there's that idea, but I think people are generally more like always curious to invest in new things because if you're first to it, you're going to do pretty well. But I do think you need to understand what you're investing in as well. So I don't fully agree with what he says, but I get what he's getting at.
Yeah, I mean, I do kind of like the perspective that was shared. Once it was kind of confirmed that people are going to be playing around in the asset class, I like the idea of stepping back and being like, right, this is just a new asset class, and the total market cap is just going to grow over time, irrespective. I do kind of like thinking about it like that. Very fair point made in the comments by Diablito, saying, is it the new cycle or just that many people are broke AF and in debt right now that normies aren't tracking BTC all-time highs? And do you know what? I think I just wrote back, like, very fair point. I think you can see in the US, at least, US consumer credit card debt like completely spiraling out of control. Not just on the kind of consumer side, on the government side as well. Like, there's a hell of a lot of debt in the States, and maybe that's something which is permeating across the board in other places. Inflation, with like in the last 2 years or in the last few years, like inflation has just been crippling people, at least definitely in Europe, and my understanding is in other places too. So maybe for that reason, it's just there isn't much spare capital around to be going risk on into some other assets, even if their primary capital is the one that's getting inflated to zero, and it would be a beneficial kind of investment decision. There's just not that spare capital. Like, the money that they have, they need to spend to kind of keep the lights on and to keep things moving. So very fair point on that. Legendary, what's your reflection on that?
Very fair point. Yeah, and just to underpin it with a bit of data, U.S. credit card debt that was at $770 billion in Q1 of 2021, and did rise to 1.13 trillion by Q4 2023. So if you put that in comparison with the total crypto market cap, U.S. credit card debt is half of our entire market cap.
That's pretty insane. Very good to bring that into the conversation. I think that's very worth considering. Very, very important point. I don't know what that means though. Like, that doesn't necessarily mean those people are going to come in higher, right? Like, if they don't have the money to come in now or the money to come in before, they're not going to necessarily FOMO in higher. It just means that they're not going to have the money, but the knock-on implications of that are actually even worse, because it just means they're going to be worse off in the future if we continue on this trajectory, and the majority of people, and even fairly affluent people, are stuck in dollars or stuck in pounds or whatever. Interesting. It almost makes me think maybe there's no retail because there is no spare money to go, and that's not going to change, right, in the current environment. Any quick reflection on that, Legendary, before we hit the headlines and do Portal Coin?
No quick reflection from mine, but I'd be very curious before we maybe get into the rest of the Web3 roundup to hear Matthew's thoughts on that, because I'm pretty sure he has something of value to add to that.
Yes, please. Matthew, your hand's raised. What are your thoughts on where we've taken this conversation?
Thanks, y'all. I think from a 401k perspective, with respect to Fidelity, talking about folks not having money, this is like pre-tax, this is automatic. Like, a lot of times these things just fold into an ETF or fold into an IRA or 401k. So sure. The good investors from a retailer perspective will be automating this and making space for it on a regular DCA kind of basis, which I think is a fair point. Again, retail, everybody's broke. Like, I get that. Credit card debt in the US is pretty insane. So I think that's a pretty apt point. Final thing I want to mention really quickly on the Fidelity note, please note that they use crypto, not specifically Bitcoin, which is really cool because they're not using digital assets. They're not allocating this specifically to Bitcoin. And they're basically opening the door and the marketing side for saying, yes, crypto is a word. That's what we're going to use. That's what we're going to call this. And it encompasses more things than Bitcoin, which kind of primes people to say like, oh, Ethereum or other tokens or indexes. So it's really cool to see them priming the pump for this in that marketing way.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think the marketing the marketing machine is just getting started, because I think the right people's interests are aligned. And I guess on that point, it's probably worth just drawing the distinction between these two different types of people. The institutions are ready, their incentives aligned to pump this and get it moving. But there's just a whole different group of people, the normies, how we may refer to them normally, who may just not participate again in the way that retail has participated before. And I think when we're talking about this inflow of demand, you're speaking about it, Matthew, from a much more corporate perspective, kind of investor perspective, when you kind of have these automated payments going in every now and again. And that's just a very different reality for a lot of people. So worth drawing that distinction between the two types of investors who might be getting exposure or not getting exposure at the moment. Very interesting stuff there. Let's get into the Web3 roundup. I think we've done enough on Bitcoin for today. So we'll get into the Web3 roundup, get you up to speed with what else you need to know from the past 24 hours in the NFT market and crypto space. And then we will touch on Portal Coin, maybe get some predictions and think about the staking announcement. So I'm going to be sharing on the screen, live on X, live on YouTube, the snapshot, which is pinned up top. Let's get into it. First piece of news: OK Dogs by OK Bears mint out in 2 minutes for 0.08 ETH. They're now trading at 0.1 ETH. This took place on Magic Eden's ETH marketplace, which has just gone live. Number 2, Rec Guys rip up 30% to reach a 0.9 ETH floor after receiving more airdrops. Number 3, Wassie's airdrop Chiblings, and the floor rises on reveal from a 0.15 ETH to 0.4. It then has now retraced to about 0.25 ETH. And finally, Mochaverse announces 500k pixel drop to active holders. I thought that was pretty interesting. You don't just get it, you've got to be active in some way as part of their Mocha ID program. So that's something to watch. In the last section of more news, OMB and Bitcoin Puppet derivative mints tomorrow. If you haven't seen those, you've got to at least look at them. I thought it was quite funny. I've included a picture with them, including Sam Bankman-Fried, in the snapshot pinned up top. You've got to take a look. It might make you chuckle. Next, SBF has been reported to be recommending investments in the digital coin Solana to prison guards. I thought that was a funny piece of news too. And then finally, Nifty Island rewards creators and top users with legendary Palm airdrops, some of which are trading at really, really high prices, standing offers of like 2 ETH, 5 ETH, I think, on some particular collections. So just demonstrating once again that participating in certain successful projects early can get you rewarded very handsomely in the type of market that we are moving into now. That is the Web3 roundup from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. If you find it brings you some value today, please do give it a like and a share. We only have a few minutes left of the show today. Legendary, do you want to touch on Portal Coin's staking announcement and maybe give a thought as to where we might go with Portal Coin tomorrow? Any expectations? Then we'll go to Sammy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with Portal Coin, maybe again, the recap launching, going live tomorrow, 10 a.m. UTC. And in terms of the staking announcement, they said, unlock the biggest launches in Web3 gaming exclusively on the Portal Launchpad that is accessible via the staking. Stakers gain VIP access to the most hyped token pre-sales, NFT mints, and drops from your favorite brands. Portal is an all access pass. I'm not going to read all of that. But the essence is stake more, score more, get more access. There is elite reward tiers. So it is structured in a way that is similar to some of the other launchpads that we know, structured in a similar way to CDFI, obviously also wanting to compete with that. So I think a lot will depend on the partnerships and lineups and drops that they will be announcing. We've seen that with CDFI, who have managed to have quite a significant run up in their token price. I think last year sitting somewhere in fall around 50 cents, now very close to $4, 7.5x to be made in there. And I think Portal Coin will follow a very similar logic in the sense of the staking interest and token performance very heavily correlated to the partners and rounds that you will be able to access via their launchpad.
Interesting stuff. Quick thought on price, Sammy. It seems like it's coming out at around $3. I don't know if that's fair. Whales Market is trading around that price. I think that's probably where it's going to be coming out at. That would be a $3 billion valuation. Do you think the staking announcement changes that in the type of market that we're in?
I think the staking will impact the price after TGE. So you'll probably see, if it didn't have staking, I think it would tank basically. But I think that the value in the token will be attributable to the value that the games that are launched on the launch pad. Because if people start staking, they receive whatever benefits from those games, whether it's tokens, whether it's access or whatever it is, NFTs. If those games aren't good, then that will be represented in the value of the token going forward. So people aren't going to stake it; they're going to dump it on the market. If those rewards they get from those games aren't necessarily tier A or whatever, and that's going to be the same for all these other launch pads as well. So I think for me, Yeah, I'd just be watching to see what games are being brought out and their timelines and stuff like that. And basically, because it's opportunity cost at the end of the day. If you stake that asset, if you lock it up for a period of time, that means that you can't do anything with that capital until such time as you can unlock, or you can get rewards from whatever the games are launching. So it depends how patient people are, and I think attention flows pretty quickly in this space. So I'd say not very patient.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, they've done a great job with attention up to this point. Legendary, any final reflections on that? Price action seems like it's coming out at 3, higher, lower. What do you think the effect of staking is?
I think to me the main difference to something like Seed World is adding to Sammy's point of wanting to lock up capital. If you bought Seed World in the bear market, or S-Fund in the bear market, not Seed World, sorry, CDFI S-Fund in the bear market, let's say 70 cents, and it went to, you locked it up and then you unlock it and you're like, let's say at $2, you made a 3x. So yes, you might want to take that profit, but with Portal Coin, both like early investors as well as the public sale are up like 15 to 40x if we assume the $3 base. So they obviously have a way higher multiple and a higher incentive to take profits on that. I think I always liked Whales market as an indicator. Again, I think that XT, where the IOUs were trading at up to $15, are way exaggerated. Obviously, like to fantasize about how my portal bags would like at $15, but I don't think that is a very realistic estimation, with or without staking.
Fair enough. Very fair thoughts. We're excited to see that happen tomorrow, and Blast goes live tomorrow too. We didn't even talk about that today. We are very excited to see that happen tomorrow. We will be back with you tomorrow to go through all of that, and Friday as well to reflect on all of the happenings. But that's it for our show today. We've run a touch over time. As always, we are live on X. We are live on YouTube from 7 a.m. Eastern time, 12 p.m. GMT for 1 hour every single day. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you to my legendary co-hosts, Legendary and Sammy. Thank you to our speakers, Matthew, Jack, Confusion, and Oxy. Thank you to all of you in the audience who joined with us again. We had more than 150 people live with us today. Great show. Hope you enjoyed it. We will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.